In the heart of Ngoma village, where the tall baobab trees whispered secrets to the wind, a girl named Zelina walked through the dusty paths with her head held low. A colorful scarf covered her right eye, wrapped tightly around her head like a shield against the world's judgment. The villagers often whispered about her. Why does she always hide her face? Maybe she has an evil eye. No, I heard she was cursed as a baby. But Zelina ignored them. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than explanations. Her mother, Adia, was the only one who ever spoke of the truth. Strength is not in what people see, but in what you choose to be, she would say as she wove baskets to sell in the market. Zelina wanted to believe her mother's words, but it was hard when Jabari, the son of the village chief, never let her forget she was different. Jabari was tall, strong, and proud, always surrounded by his gang of friends. His father was the most powerful man in the village, and that made him untouchable. Every day, Jabari found a new way to mock Zelina. What are you hiding under that scarf, Zelina? A snake, he sneered one morning as she walked past the school gates. His friends laughed loudly, their voices echoing across the yard. Zelina gripped her books tighter and walked faster, pretending not to hear. But Jabari wasn't done. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Or maybe, he continued, you have an evil eye, and you curse us all. The other children gasped, taking a step back as if Zelina were truly dangerous. Zelina's heart pounded. Why do they always do this? Why do they always make me feel like I don't belong? She didn't respond. She never did. Instead, she walked around them and entered the school, her stomach heavy with unspoken words. School was supposed to be a place of learning, but for Zelina, it was a battlefield. She never sat in the front row. She never spoke unless the teacher asked her directly. She never joined in the games during break time. Because if she drew too much attention, Jabari would find another reason to torment her. But one thing kept her going, her love for stories. She loved sitting under the shade of the great baobab tree, listening to Elder Kwame tell ancient folktales of warriors, spirits, and lost kingdoms. She would close her eyes and imagine a world where being different wasn't a curse, but a blessing. She wished, just once, that she could be like the heroes in those stories, bold, fearless, and powerful. But she was just Zelina, the girl with the hidden mark point. One afternoon, as the sun blazed high in the sky, the school bell rang, signaling the end of the day. Zelina hurried to pack her books, hoping to leave before Jabari could find her. But she wasn't fast enough. As she stepped outside, she heard his voice. Zelina, wait. She froze. The other children paused, sensing something was about to happen. Jabari stepped forward, his grin wide. Tomorrow is the festival of masks, he said. Everyone will wear masks, but do you even need one? His friends burst into laughter. She already hides her face, someone jeered. The sting of their words burned deeper than the hot sun above. Zelina forced herself to breathe. She would not cry, not in front of them. Without a word, she turned and walked away. But deep inside, something in her heart cracked, a small piece of her courage, slowly breaking apart. She had endured their words for years, but tomorrow, at the Festival of Masks, everything would change. Because for the first time, the truth behind her hidden mark would be revealed. The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing Ngoma village in hues of orange and gold as the night of the Festival of Masks began. Drums echoed in the distance, filling the air with the rhythm of celebration. Lanterns flickered, casting long shadows over the crowd gathering in the village square. For every child in the village, this night was magical. It was the one time of the year when no one's face was seen, hidden behind beautifully crafted masks of animals, spirits, and ancient warriors. But for Zelina, tonight was different. Tonight, she would be forced to step into the light. She stood near the edge of the festival, watching the dancers twirl, their masks painted in vibrant reds, deep blues, and golden swirls. Her hands clutched the simple wooden mask she had made. It was plain, unlike the elaborate ones worn by the others, but it was enough to hide her face. As she hesitated, she heard a familiar voice. "Why do you need a mask, Zelina?" Her heart froze. She turned to see Jabari, his own mask pushed up onto his head, revealing his arrogant smirk. His friends stood behind him, laughing. "You already wear one every day." Jabari sneered. The laughter erupted, loud and cruel. The music, the dancing, the festival, all of it faded into the background as every eye turned toward Zelina. Jabari stepped closer. "Maybe tonight, you should show everyone what's really under that scarf." He lunged forward and before she could react, his hands grabbed her scarf. A sharp gasp ran through the crowd as the fabric slipped away. For the first time in years, Zelina's face was fully visible. And the village went silent. On Zelina's right eye was a glowing mark, faint but unmistakable. A delicate spiral of golden lines traced down her cheek, shimmering under the festival lights. Some villagers gasped. Others whispered in hushed voices. "What is that? Is it a curse?" "No, it looks like the mark of the ancestors." Jabari took a step back, his smirk fading. He had expected a scar, something ugly, something to laugh at. But instead, Zelina stood before them not as something to mock, but something mysterious and powerful. A voice cut through the crowd. "Elder Kwame." The old man stepped forward, his wise eyes locking onto Zelina's mark. This is no ordinary mark," he said slowly. Zelina's breath hitched. "This is the symbol of a gift long forgotten, a gift only given to those who are meant to see beyond what others cannot." A murmur spread through the crowd. Jabari swallowed hard. This was not what he had planned. He had wanted to humiliate her, not turn her into something special. But it was too late. The village no longer saw a girl to mock. They saw something far greater. And for the first time in her life, Zelina did not feel small. She felt seen. She felt powerful. But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. Because now that her secret was revealed, everything would change. The festival had ended, but the whispers remained. By morning, Ngoma village buzzed with rumors, talk of Zelina's mark, of the way it glowed under the lanterns, of how Elder Kwame had called it a gift. Some feared her. Others admired her. But one thing was certain, no one ignored her anymore. Zelina sat outside her mother's small hut, staring at the ground. The events of last night played over and over in her head. She should have felt relieved. The secret was out. But instead, she felt exposed. Her mother, Adia, stood beside her, running a hand over Zelina's braided hair. "My child," she said softly. "I always knew you were meant for more than this village would ever understand." Before Zelina could reply, they heard footsteps approaching. It was Elder Kwame. The old man walked slowly, leaning on his wooden staff. The beads around his neck rattled softly as he moved. "Zelina," he greeted, his deep voice filled with something more than curiosity, something like knowing. She stood, lowering her head slightly out of respect. "Elder." He studied her for a moment before nodding. "Walk with me." Zelina hesitated, then followed him toward the edge of the village, where the trees stood tall and ancient. The air smelled of damp earth and the faint sweetness of wildflowers as they walked. After a long silence, Elder Kwame finally spoke. "Do you know the story of the children of the hidden site?" Zelina frowned. "I have heard many stories, Elder, but not this one." He smiled, his weathered face thoughtful. "Long ago, before the Great Wars, there were people born with a mark on their skin, a mark that meant they could see what others could not. Zelina's breath caught in her throat. See what? Kwame stopped walking and turned to face her. The truth. She blinked. I don't understand. You will, he said. But first, tell me, since you were a child, have you ever seen things that others could not? Felt things before they happened? Zelina felt a chill run down her spine. She had. The dreams. She had always dismissed them, but now they felt like pieces of something bigger. She nodded slowly. Kwame's eyes darkened with something between pride and warning. Then your journey is only beginning, child. You are one of the last of them, the ones who can see beyond what is shown. But beware, for gifts like yours are never given without purpose, or without danger. While Zelina spoke with Elder Kwame, Jabari sat in his father's hut, restless. His father, Chief Okafor, watched him with a furrowed brow. You have been quiet since the festival, the chief said. Why? Jabari clenched his fist. The girl, he muttered. Zelina. She is different. His father's expression darkened. Yes, he said. And that is why you should have never meddled with her. Foolish boy. Jabari gritted his teeth. She made me look weak in front of everyone. They look at her now like she is something special. His father sighed. She is. And if you are smart, you will stay away from her. But Jabari was not listening. Fear twisted inside him, fear that the girl he had mocked for years was no longer below him. And fear had a way of turning into something much, much worse. As Zelina returned home, her mother watched her with careful eyes. What did Elder Kwame say? Adia asked. Zelina hesitated. He said, my mark is not a curse. Adia smiled softly, but there was worry in her eyes. I always knew that, she said. Zelina swallowed. But he also said it was a gift, and that it comes with a purpose. Adia sighed and placed a warm hand on her daughter's shoulder. Then you must decide what to do with it. Zelina nodded. She had spent her whole life hiding. But maybe it was time to stop running from the truth. Maybe it was time to embrace what she was meant to be. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Jabari was already planning his next move. And soon, Zelina's strength would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. The days after the Festival of Masks were different. For the first time in her life, Zelina was not invisible. Some villagers now treated her with respect, believing that her mark was a sign of the ancestors' blessing. Others, however, whispered behind her back, afraid that she carried a curse. But one thing was certain, Jabari had not forgotten. If anything, his hatred for her had only grown. At the village well, where women gathered to fetch water and gossip, the topic of Zelina was on everyone's lips. I heard Elder Kwame said her mark means she can see the future, one woman whispered. No, another said. She is a spirit child. That is why her eye glowed. But others shook their heads. A girl like her should not be trusted. The ancestors do not mark people for no reason. This could be dangerous. Zelina heard every word, but she kept her head high. She had spent too many years being afraid. She would not be afraid anymore. Jabari sat outside his hut, gripping a small sharp stone in his hand. His jaw was clenched, his mind racing. Zelina had humiliated him. People no longer feared him the way they used to. She thinks she is special, he muttered. I will remind her that she is not. One of his friends, Mosi, leaned forward. What are you going to do? Jabari's lips curled into a cruel smile. She embarrassed me in front of the whole village. Now, I will embarrass her in front of everyone. He stood, his dark eyes burning with revenge. Tomorrow, she will wish she had never shown her face. The next day, the sun burned bright over Ngoma village. The schoolyard was busy with children playing and talking, but Zelina felt something was wrong. She could feel the stares, the whispers. Then she heard it. Zelina. She turned. Jabari stood in the middle of the yard, a smirk on his face. His voice rang loud for everyone to hear. Since you are so powerful now, let's see if your mark can save you. A murmur spread through the crowd. Zelina's heart tightened. What are you talking about? She asked cautiously. Jabari gestured to a large clay pot filled with water beside him. If your mark is truly a gift from the ancestors, then prove it. Reach inside and take out the stone at the bottom. Zelina frowned. That is ridiculous, she said. But Jabari grinned wider. Are you afraid? Or maybe your gift is just a lie? The children gasped. Zelina felt her anger rise. She knew this was a trap. But if she refused, they would think she was weak. She could not run anymore. So she stepped forward. As Zelina approached the clay pot, Jabari's eyes glowed with cruel excitement. The pot was large and deep. If she put her hand inside, she would not be able to see what was at the bottom. She took a breath and plunged her hand into the water. At first, all she felt was smooth stones. But then, pain. She yanked her hand back, gasping. The crowd gasped with her. Her fingers were bleeding. Jabari laughed loudly. Oh no. Did the ancestors not protect you? He mocked. Zelina glared at him. He had placed something sharp inside. You are a coward, Jabari, she said calmly. The children watched in silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, Zelina reached in again. This time, she did not flinch. She did not cry out. She felt the sharp edges cut her palm, but she kept going. Her fingers found the stone. Slowly, she pulled it out and held it high. Blood dripped down her wrist, but she did not care. The children stared in shock. Even Jabari's friends looked uneasy. Jabari's smile vanished. Zelina locked eyes with him. You wanted to see my strength, Jabari, she said, her voice steady. Now you have seen it. Jabari clenched his fist, his pride crumbling. The villagers would not forget this moment. But Zelina knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. That night, as Zelina cleaned her wounds, she thought about what Elder Kwame had said. Gifts like yours are never given without purpose, or without danger. She understood now. Jabari would not stop. And next time, he would not use water. He would use fire. And Zelina had to be ready. Because something told her that her true test was still to come. The night after the trial of water, the village of Ngoma was silent. The whispers had died down, and even the children who once mocked Zelina had stopped their cruel laughter. But deep in the chief's hut, one person was far from silent. Jabari sat on the floor, his hands clenched into fist. His pride had never suffered a blow like this before. She humiliated me, he spat. In front of everyone. His father, Chief Okafor, sighed, watching his son with disappointment. You brought this on yourself, Jabari, he said. The girl has a power you do not understand. You must leave her alone. But Jabari refused to listen. Power, he sneered. She is just a girl with a glowing mark. She is nothing. The chief narrowed his eyes. Then why are you so afraid of her? Jabari had no answer. He turned away, his mind swelling with thoughts of revenge. He would make sure that Zelina paid for what she had done. But what he did not know, his hatred would be his undoing. The next morning, Jabari did not wake up early as he always did. His mother, worried, entered his hut and shook him gently. Jabari, wake up. But he did not stir. His skin was burning hot. His body was drenched in sweat. When his mother touched his forehead, she gasped. Husband, she called, running to fetch the chief. Chief Okafor rushed inside, only to find his son weak, his breath shallow. Jabari, what is wrong? The chief demanded. Jabari tried to speak, but no words came out. He clutched his throat, his eyes wide with panic. His voice was gone. The chief called for the best healers in the village. They crushed herbs, mixed potions, and whispered prayers over Jabari's body. But nothing worked. This is not an ordinary sickness, one of the healers muttered. It is as if his very spirit has been taken. The chief's wife wept. My son, what is happening to him? The elders of the village gathered, discussing in hushed voices. Then, one of them spoke. There is only one explanation, he said gravely. He has offended a spirit child. Until she forgives him, he will never recover. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the chief. They knew who they were speaking of. They knew the only person Jabari had ever wronged. The girl with the glowing mark. The girl who had suffered under his torment for years. The girl who had walked away from his cruelty without seeking revenge. Zelina. Chief Okafor did not believe in curses. But as he watched his son, unable to move, unable to speak, fear gripped his heart. He had been warned. Leave her alone, Elder Kwame had said. She has a power you do not understand. But Jabari had not listened. Now, only one person could save him. And so, for the first time in his life, the chief, a man who never bowed to anyone, walked through the village to the home of a simple weaver. He knocked once. The door opened, and Zelina's mother stood there, her eyes calm but knowing. I need to see your daughter, Chief Okafor said. Zelina stood in the doorway, facing the most powerful man in the village. She should have been afraid. But she wasn't. Chief Okafor, she said, her voice steady. He hesitated before speaking. My son is dying, he admitted. They say he has offended a spirit child, and that only your forgiveness can heal him. Zelina stared at him, her expression unreadable. Do you believe that, Chief? The man sighed. I do not know what to believe anymore. For the first time, Zelina saw not a powerful chief, but a desperate father. She thought of all the pain Jabari had caused her. She thought of the tears, the insults, the humiliation. But then she heard her mother's voice in her heart. Strength is not in revenge, my child. Strength is in knowing when to forgive. Slowly, she nodded. I will forgive him, she said. But on one condition. The chief's eyes flashed with hope. Anything, child. Zelina's voice did not waver. Jabari must never set foot in this school again. He must never hurt another person the way he hurt me. The chief swallowed his pride and nodded. It will be done. That evening, Zelina was led to Jabari's bedside. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken, his body weak as a dying flame. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she whispered the words that would change everything. I forgive you. The moment the words left her lips, the heart shook as if the very air had shifted. Jabari gasped, his body jolting upright. His eyes widened, color returning to his skin. He reached for his throat, his voice returning in a whisper. He croaked. His mother let out a cry of joy. The healers gasped. The curse was lifted up by morning, the news had spread. Jabari had been healed. And he was a different person. The boy who once laughed at others' pain now walked with his head lowered in humility. The boy who once thought he was untouchable had learned the power of fear. And the girl who once hid from the world was now seen by all, not as a curse, not as a victim, but as someone who carried the wisdom of the ancestors. No one whispered about her anymore. No one mocked her mark. Because now, they feared her more than they ever feared Jabari. And Zelina. She did not need their fear. She had something far greater. Her strength, her power, and her place in history. The morning after Jabari's miraculous recovery, the village of Ngoma was filled with an air of unease. News of Zelina's forgiveness had spread, but so had the realization that Jabari's actions would not be forgotten so easily. Some villagers believed he had suffered enough. Others whispered, "What kind of lesson is it if he walks away without consequence?" But Elder Kwame had called for a gathering at the village square, and so, under the blazing morning sun, the entire village assembled. At the center of it all stood Zelina, Jabari, and Chief Okafor. This was not just about forgiveness. This was about justice. Jabari stood before the crowd, his head lowered. His once proud posture was gone, replaced by something Zelina had never seen before: humility. His father, Chief Okafor, spoke first. "My son has wronged this village. He has wronged this girl. And in his arrogance, he brought suffering upon himself." The villagers murmured in agreement. Elder Kwame stepped forward, leaning on his staff. "Zelina has shown great strength. While others would have sought revenge, she chose the higher path, forgiveness." All eyes turned to Zelina. She stood tall, her glowing mark catching the light. But, Elder Kwame continued, "Forgiveness does not erase consequences." The crowd murmured in approval. Zelina's gaze locked onto Jabari's. "I will not let your suffering be in vain," she said. "If I forgive you, you must prove that you have changed." Jabari swallowed hard. "I will do whatever you ask." Zelina did not blink. "Then I have 3 conditions." A hush fell over the crowd as Zelina spoke. "Condition 1. You will leave this school forever." Jabari nodded. He had already accepted this. He had caused too much harm here. He would no longer walk its grounds as if he were untouchable. Condition 2. You will help those who suffer, just as you once caused suffering. The villagers murmured. Jabari stiffened. "You mean I must help the weak?" "Yes," Zelina said firmly. "You will use your strength for something other than cruelty." Jabari took a deep breath. "I accept." Then came the 3rd condition, the one that truly shook the village. Condition 3. You will not just apologize to me. You will apologize to every person you have ever hurt. Gasps spread through the crowd. Jabari froze. "Every person?" "Yes," Zelina said. "Because forgiveness means nothing if your heart does not change." Jabari's hands tightened into fists. But then, he let them go. For the first time in his life, he lowered his head, truly humbled. "I will do it." The villagers watched in silence. This was the first time they had seen Jabari without arrogance, without cruelty, just a boy who had learned his lesson the hardest way possible. Elder Kwame nodded approvingly. "Then it is settled." That day, Jabari began his long journey of redemption. He walked through the village, standing before every child, every elder, every person he had hurt with his words, his fists, and his pride. And with a bowed head, he spoke the words no one had ever imagined they would hear from him. "I am sorry." At first, people did not believe it. But as the days passed, they saw his change was real. He helped the elderly carry water from the well. He spent time with younger children, teaching them what he had once ignored: kindness, humility, and respect. And though forgiveness came slowly, it came nonetheless. The once feared boy became something else entirely. A lesson. A warning. And, in time, a man who no longer needed to prove his worth through cruelty. As for Zelina, her world had changed forever. No one mocked her mark anymore. No one whispered curses in her direction. Instead, she became a symbol of strength, of wisdom, of the power that lies in knowing when to fight and when to forgive. One evening, Elder Kwame found her sitting beneath the great baobab tree, her eyes filled with thoughts. "What troubles you, child?" he asked. She looked at him and sighed. "I feel like this is just the beginning." The old man smiled. "That is because it is." Zelina glanced down at her hands, tracing the faint scar left by the trial of water. "Then what comes next?" Elder Kwame chuckled. "That," he said, "is for you to discover." And as the stars began to shine above Ngoma village, Zelina realized something deep within her heart. Her journey was far from over. But for the first time in her life, she was ready for it. The days after Jabari's public apology felt like the start of something new. The air in Ngoma village had shifted, no longer thick with whispers of fear, no longer heavy with the weight of the past. People no longer saw Zelina as a cursed girl. Now, they saw a girl who had endured, a girl who had forgiven, a girl whose strength could not be broken. But deep inside, Zelina knew her journey was far from over. True to his word, Jabari changed. It did not happen all at once. At first, people still looked at him with suspicion. They wondered if his kindness was just an act. But time proved otherwise. He carried heavy baskets for the elderly. He taught younger boys to defend the weak, not harm them. And most of all, he no longer walked with the prideful arrogance he once did. Zelina watched him from afar. She did not need his friendship. But she was glad he had learned. The spirits had punished him. The village had judged him. But in the end, he had chosen to become better. That, she realized, was his journey. And hers. Hers was only beginning. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in strokes of gold and crimson, Elder Kwame found Zelina sitting beneath the great baobab tree. She sat with her knees drawn to her chest, her thoughts distant. The old man chuckled as he sat beside her, resting his weight on his worn wooden staff. "You seem troubled, child." Zelina let out a slow breath. "I do not know what comes next," she admitted. Elder Kwame smiled. "And do you think you must know? Life does not reveal everything at once. Some truths must be discovered on the journey." She turned to him, confused. "But what is my journey, Elder? What am I meant to do now?" The old man's eyes gleamed with knowing. "You are marked, Zelina, not by misfortune, but by something far greater. The ancestors do not give gifts without purpose." She touched the glowing mark on her face, tracing the golden spirals with her fingertips. "What does it mean?" Elder Kwame's smile was mysterious. "You will find out, in time. But tell me, Zelina, what do you wish to do?" Zelina blinked. No one had ever asked her that before. For so long, she had been defined by what others thought of her. But now, for the first time, her path was hers to choose. She looked out at the horizon, where the sun melted into the land, where the world stretched far beyond the borders of Ngoma village. "I want to see more," she whispered. "I want to learn more. I want to know why I was given this mark, what it truly means." Elder Kwame nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer all along. "Then that is what you must do." 2 days later, Zelina stood at the edge of the village. Her mother, Adia, stood beside her, adjusting the small bag of supplies strapped across Zelina's back. "Are you sure about this?" Adia asked, her voice thick with emotion. Zelina nodded. "Yes, Mama. I have to go." Tears welled in Adia's eyes, but she smiled proudly. "Then go with the blessings of the ancestors, my child. And remember, you are never alone." Elder Kwame stepped forward, placing a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder. Asterisk, the world beyond this village is vast, Zelina. It will test you. It will challenge you. But never forget, you carry the wisdom of your people with you. Zelina bowed her head in respect. I will return one day. Kwame chuckled. When you do, you will no longer be a girl seeking answers. You will be a woman who carries them. She smiled. Then, with the morning sun casting a golden path before her, Zelina took her first step beyond Ngoma village. Beyond the place where she had once been mocked. Beyond the home where she had once hidden. She was no longer just Zelina, the girl with the hidden mark. She was Zelina, the girl who had embraced her destiny. And her story was only just beginning.